Hello everyone and welcome to Sinful Gaming. I hope you're all doing well, I hope you're all staying safe, and most of all, I hope you're all fighting that war against the Grey. Today we have a Warhammer Age of Sigmar video, and this one is focused on the 5 best and worst armies to begin your journey into Warhammer Age of Sigmar with. Now, what we're talking about when we mean best or worst, we're not talking about in any way a competitive setting. We're talking about armies that give you an easy access and into the Warhammer Age of Sigmar universe, community, and game in general, and those that don't. We're talking about armies that make it easy for you to learn to play, and armies that have a much more higher floor than others as well. So, without further ado, this is going to be my 5 armies that are the best, and my 5 armies that are the worst to begin Age of Sigmar with. And to start with, let's talk about what we're looking for in a good army to start the game with. And so, first of all, it needs to have good variety, but not an overbearing variety. It also needs to have easy access to the models that are in its range. This means armies that have a lot of direct-to-order stuff definitely do not fit our bill of easy to collect and easy to start with armies. But what we mean by good variety is we don't mean something overbearing. You can have good variety, we're having a lot of troops that all benefit each other in the same book. You can have 30 war scrolls in your army and still be a good variety without being overbearing, so long as everything works in the same manner. We have some armies that are effectively all these mini sub-factions put together that make it much harder to bring a cohesive force together. Cost is also an issue when we're talking about getting into Warhammer Age of Sigmar. We're looking at armies that have easy ways to get in, that are cost effective as well. We're looking at armies that are easy to play. Now, this sounds obvious, but you don't want to go in with the most complex army to begin your Warhammer Age of Sigmar universe, or you might find yourself just flustered and, I guess, it all too over the top for you. And a key point on this is I like armies when I'm teaching people to play that have an ease of use without their battle tome. Now, to some this might sound weird, but the battle tomes aren't required. We have free rule access to the basic core rules and the basic rules for all war scrolls on the Age of Sigmar app and the website for free. So the ability to just pick up some models without needing to get anything else and just roll some dice and play a game with them is really important to me. Armies that require their battle tome for their units to really work in any sort of fashion definitely do not, for me, count as best starting armies. And lastly, we don't want any complex mechanics or any major bookkeeping. So this means things like summoning or things like where you have to assign tokens because you have resources other than your basic resources in the game to use. But let's get looking, and first of all, we're going to start with my top 5 armies to get started with Warhammer Age of Sigmar, and then after that, we'll look at the 5 I suggest to not start Warhammer Age of Sigmar with. Of course, though, this is all subjective. If you really like the models for an army, that can overcome anything I say here. If you love those models, go get them, because that at the end of the day is going to be the biggest win. If you can love those models, you'll keep pushing on through any problems I've come up with here. Number 1 for me for a great army to get into Warhammer Age of Sigmar with is the poster boys of the game, the Stormcast Eternals. And I should say poster boys and ladies, because they have a fantastic range of both female and male sculpts. They have a decent variety of models, in fact one of the largest ranges of Age of Sigmar, and I know I said this could be overbearing just before, but the fact that a lot of the Stormcast Eternal models actually benefit each other and they work in cohesion alongside their fellow troops does do wonders. There are, of course, particular things in Stormcast that don't work alongside other things, but you have characters that connect to everything and the whole army can be cohesive and fight as a cohesive force well without having to go down any particular route. You also save a lot of money with Stormcast Eternals as well. They have access in both starter set iterations so far in Warhammer Age of Sigmar and a ton of start collecting box sets, along with having some of the cheaper ranges as well. Despite being, I guess, in Australia they're about 110 for 10 Liberators, the points for what you're paying for them is actually quite high. They have an ease of play. They're large troops. They have good shooting. They have some decent melee, and they play exactly as you would think they do. And they do really well without their battle tome, mainly because their traits and their allegiance abilities in the battle tome don't really affect them. Of course, Stormcasts do become more complicated as you start adding this in, and especially once you start adding in the Stormkeep rules from Broken Realms Morathi. But for the basic rules, they play really well just off their base war scrolls. They don't need a lot. They don't rely on that book at all when you're learning the game with them. They also have no complex mechanics for summoning or storing points. They've just got spells and prayers. It's really simple when you start getting into them. They're a little bit more deep. They're definitely an army I suggest picking up and starting the game with. Not only that, but they are really easy to paint. Large, flat surfaces take on colours really well, and you can do a variety of colours and have them look absolutely fantastic in a short amount of time with very little effort. Number 2 for me, for getting into Warhammer Age of Sigmar as a good army, is Nighthorn. Nighthorn, once again, have all the good cost efficiencies that the Stormcast Eternals do, being that they're currently in the Soul War starter box. You can also, like Stormcast Eternals, pick them up in the Mortal Realms magazine if that's the thing happening in a country around you. And they also have the Start Collecting Malignance box, which fits really well into Legion of Grief armies, which is sort of a mix between the Legions of Nagash and Nighthorn, sort of an offshoot of the two. But either way, they've also got some really good variety of kits for quite a newer range. They've got a good load of characters, some different units, and they take on paint really, really well. You can paint Nighthorn up to look amazing really, really quickly with just some washes and glazes. Ease of play, they do once again run really well off the War Scrolls, and while they are a death army and they have some regeneration mechanics, a lot of those come from the actual War Scrolls and models, not necessarily the army rules itself, so they play really well without needing a battle tome when you're first learning Warhammer Age of Sigmar. And they have no really complex mechanics as well. There's no proper summoning in the army. They have, a few things here and there, but it's mostly just bringing models back. And they don't have any bookkeeping requirements with tokens and such as well. They've also, when you start adding in the allegiances, have some really just fun rules to play around with. Like they're rolling charge and getting over a certain number, allowing them to attack in the charge phase is a cool but simple rule that gives them a little bit more. But all in all, they're just a really easy army to get into the game with, both for cost to play and even for painting as well. Number 3 for me for getting into Warhammer Age of Sigmar are the green skins known as the Orc War Clans, in particular the Ironjawz side of that book. Orc War Clans have, once again, an easy cost of access, mainly because their Start Collecting box is really, really good value and can be bought multiple times. You can at least buy 2 or 3 of that Start Collecting box and have a decent force. Add in maybe a single monster or another character of some sort, and you've got a really solid force that's not only good, but actually competitive as well. They have quite a small variety of troops, will be said, but the models more than make up for this with a wide variety of alternate builds and models. They've got some absolutely fantastic looking kits. Also, the fact that they do generally cost that little bit more points wise means you're not having to buy as many, so this variety is not as big an issue. Ease of play, Oryx are fantastic for playing and learning with, because you literally run them up the table and try and smash your opponent, and that is a great army to learn and play with. They've got some shooting, magic, and other stuff within the army, which allows you to learn other mechanics as you're learning to play. But all in all, they do play really well, and once again, play really well without the battle tome as well, which is very important for when you're beginning. There are very few complex mechanics. Probably the most complex one you're ever going to deal with any sort of models from the Orc War Clans is you're going to have War points stored up in Big War. But my suggestion, if you're getting into Orc War Clans, so when you're beginning Age of Sigmar, is to go into Ironjawz first. And smashing and bashing is a really simple special rule that they have. And that's why I think Orc War Clans are a good army to get into Warhammer Age of Sigmar. Number 4 for me, for an army that's great to get into Warhammer Age of Sigmar with, is the Ogremoore Tribes. They have a lot of similarities, in fact, to why I suggested Orc War Clans. They have a great Start Collecting box that you can buy multiple times over. In fact, even more so, you could buy 4 or 5 of that Start Collecting box and still make use of all those models and different variations of the game. Mainly because that big kit that comes in there, the Thundertusk Stonehorn kit, has a variety of different builds. Also, when you're playing in Beastclaw Raiders factions of Ogremoore Tribes, those cavalry troops that you have, become much more useful as well. They've got a decent variety of troops, especially when you start looking into the Gutbuster side, which is the unmounted, unfrosty sort of version of Ogremoore Tribes. They become really cool and have great variety. They're also some of the best models in the game. Even though they are fine cast and they are direct to order, I still think the idea of the Man-Eaters is just a fantastic looking set of models and definitely something to really go onto. But paint-wise, they're really easy. They take paint really well. Those big monsters can get painted really, really quick. And ogres have nice big flat areas of skin and really big, beefy areas just in general of a lot of parts of their models. So they're really easy to paint and not a lot of fine detail work is required to make them look good. They play really well, really easy, same as Ogremoore Clans, run them straight up the field and go smash. And they play really well without the battle tome. They're strong war scrolls by themselves. You don't need to use that battle tome when you're first learning with the army. They've got very little complex mechanics, in fact almost none, and they just play really simply. It is a great army all in all, and I couldn't suggest them more. In fact, I may even say that Ogremoore Tribes are the best army to get into Warhammer Age of Sigmar with. And the last army I would suggest someone to get into Warhammer Age of Sigmar with is going to sound a bit of a strange one to some people, but that is Seraphon. Now, when I talk about Seraphon and getting into Seraphon, this is much like the Ogremoore Clans, and I'm talking about a particular way to play the book that's great to get into a Seraphon with, and that is the Coalesced. This removes all the summoning and all the movement mechanics and play style that goes into the army and replaces it with just a much tougher, fighty combat style army, which is very good for learning Warhammer Age of Sigmar with. Not only that, but it's dinosaurs riding dinosaurs, and what is not cool about that, everyone loves them. They've got a good variety of models, some fantastic monster kits in a wide variety. And what I really like about their play style as well and their ease of play, they do play really well without the battle tome, but also the battle tome's sub-factions do a really good job, I feel, of leading you down a particular path and showing you how to play that. Like, they want you to play particular things in particular sub-factions within this book, and I think it's one of the best at doing that. Cost-wise, they have a fantastic couple of Start Collecting boxes. Actually, I think both of them are really great. The Start Collecting Seraphon box set, which comes with a Carnosaur and Saurus and Saurus Cavalry, is a really great way to go into Coalesce to start with. But the Start Collecting Skinks box set is also a fantastic box set, as all the models in both variations are really, really useful to have in your Seraphon army. When you're playing Coalesce, they have very little complex mechanics, and even then, their summoning is probably one of the more nicer to use summoning mechanics in the game. Really quite easy to use. And they also take paint really well. Being a scaled sort of race and creatures, they take dry brushing and shading and all that sort of stuff really well, and just gives them a really easy paint job to do to make them look nice. This also does mean that, like, you can actually take it to that next level really easy, because you can do your Seraphon up very basic to begin with basic techniques like dry brushing and washing, but you can also then go back and highlight them and do other things later to make them that little bit better as you go along and progress along your own journey. Seraphon are, in my mind, especially when you're playing Coalesced, a great army to get into Warhammer Age of Sigmar with. And now we're going to look at armies I suggest to not get into Warhammer Age of Sigmar with. And like I said at the start of the video, if you really love the models, then you can ignore anything I say here on why not to, but maybe take this as advice of the challenges you will face beginning with such an army. So for me, number one is Ossiarch Bone Rippers. For me, there are two key factors as to why I don't suggest starting with Ossiarch Bone Rippers to anyone in Warhammer Age of Sigmar. And number one would be that they flat out ignore one rule in the game, and that is ignoring Battle Shock. Now, this might sound like a good thing that they ignore a rule in the game, but for me, Battle Shock is one of the core aspects of the game. It's not like they're ignoring something extra, they're ignoring a major mechanic that is fundamental to the game. Battle Shock is how we resolve our combats. And by ignoring it, you're not actually teaching that player anything of how to use it. They're only going to learn it secondhand. Like, they're never going to be actually taking a Battle Shock test, and they won't really learn anything about it unless they get to do it themselves. Point number two is, once again, they play around with another core mechanic of the game, and that is command points. They don't actually use command points in Ossiarch Bone Rippers, and they have this alternate system called Relentless Discipline Points. This, for me, is once again the same reasons why I don't like the fact that they ignore Battleshock is they lose a core mechanic of the game and having to learn this other system, which means they're just not learning a basic fundamental part of the game, and they're only going to learn that secondhand. These two reasons, along with cost as well, they are a relatively expensive army, though low model counts that does offset that. And for me, they also, because of this relentless discipline, don't play well without the battle tome, which means entering in with this army, you have that extra cost of needing the battle tome straight away to play them. Relentless discipline points do rack up a lot quicker than command points, and they are generated at the start of every turn, and they have a whole bunch of extra rules on how they work. And this is just a complex mechanic that when you're learning the game, you really don't need to be struggling with. They're also rather detailed. While some of the basic troops go together really well, their heroes and a lot of their other stuff have some really fine details that can be hard to get to for a newer painter or newer hobbyist getting into the game. For me, they're not an army I would personally suggest to start Warhammer Age of Sigmar with. Number 2 is an army that I personally have a lot of fondness for, but I would never suggest someone getting into the game of Warhammer Age of Sigmar with, and that is Daughters of Kane. For me, Daughters of Kane, there is one big fundamental reason why I strongly don't suggest anyone getting into the game with them and that is cost. Even if you are playing the more elite version of the snakes, they can still rack up costs really, really quickly. And if you're playing with the Witch Elves, which is at the moment the more popular version and the more suggested way to play Daughters of Kane, they become really, really expensive. When 300 points only gets you 30 Witch Elves, and that's almost $300 Australian just to get that unit on the table. This becomes an issue when you're getting into the game because you just don't have the ability to get a decent sized point army on the table quickly, and you may in fact lose interest before you actually ever get to play a game. They do have a really simple mechanic as an army-wide mechanic when you start getting the battle tome, and they do actually play quite well without their battle tome as well. And they do have a good variety of units as well. So all those things are really positive. If you can stand paying a bit of money for the army, I recommend going for it. But for me, the cost of this army is definitely just a really big deterrent on it. They are really expensive to get into to play them in, I guess, the more popular ways to play them. And even still quite expensive to get into them in the less popular, more snake or Kinarai versions of the army. Definitely not an army I would suggest for me to get into Warhammer Age of Sigmar. Number 3 for me is a brand new army that's come out for Warhammer Age of Sigmar, and that is Luminesce Realms. Much like the Ossiarch Bone Reapers, they have a lot of token and sort of resource management within the army, and not only that, the fact that so many of the models within the force are actually wizards, this adds just more and more rules that you're just having to remember, and more choices you're having to make before you even put your army down on the table. Cost-wise, they are a little bit more expensive than your average army as well. They probably come in even a little bit more than the Ossiarch Bone Reapers cost, and the fact that they also are a bit more plentiful on the table, this can all add up. They also generally don't play really well without their battle tome. The fact that all of them are wizards, meaning they all want to be taking spells, and the fact that they rely on this resource to really get the most out of their troops and using it as a timing thing and using them at the right time is a very important thing in the army. They don't play well without the battle tome, which means, once again, it's just another expense at the start of your Warhammer Age of Sigmar journey. They've just got complex mechanics, they're expensive, and they don't play well when you're first learning the game. You're needing to buy a battle tome. They, for me, are a fantastic army. I'm a big fan of Luminesce Realm Lords. I love all the weird and wacky stuff they do, but for me, they're just not a good army for new players to get into the game of Warhammer Age of Sigmar. I would almost go as far, in all honesty, to say they are one of the worst, if not maybe the worst army to start Warhammer Age of Sigmar with. Number 4 is an army dear to my heart, but in all honesty, I can't suggest they're a great army to get into Warhammer Age of Sigmar with, and that is Cities of Sigmar. For me, a big thing that they have is a lot of their range is on made to order, which means they are really hard to get. You can't just generally walk into a Warhammer store or a local game store and pick up this army. You generally might only be able to find the Star Collecting boxes on the shelves, though those Star Collecting boxes, particularly the Anvil Guard one, are really good value and can be bought multiple times. The big thing for me with Cities of Sigmar is a bunch of sub-factions that play in power pairs that work together. The army overall is really complicated to play and really complicated to put together. The Battle Tome has a bunch of different sub-allegiances for the army that actually essentially turn the army into 7, if not 9, including Broken Realms and Wrathi, different armies that all play very, very differently. It can be a lot to get to grips with. There are also, while cheaper box sets, you are having to buy a lot of models for this army. It is generally a rather plentiful army with models, so this takes up time with both painting and can also, while the boxes may be cheaper than a lot of the newer kits, is deceptive because you're having to buy maybe 2 or 3 times as many models to fill out the army, so cost does rack up as well. Ease of play, the models do generally work pretty well off their base war scrolls for learning the game, but like I said, the Battle Tome really does add a lot of layers to the army and does make them that little bit harder to play. For the most part, they don't have many complex mechanics. They do have some sub-allegiances that have some weird rules or have a lot of rules that add a lot of stuff to the army. Say Hallowheart, where you get 2 spells per wizard, and it does become a lot of sort of counting up your spells and making sure you've cast everything in a particular order to do particular things. It can become a lot. But they are a really cool looking army, and as mentioned in the video a lot of times now, if you really love the models, go for it. These are a great army though to get into the game if you're from old Warhammer Fantasy, because generally you've got a lot of the models and they probably fit into this army for you. And lastly, the last army I personally don't suggest people get into the game of Warhammer Age of Sigmar with is Silverneth. For me, there is one single massive reason I don't suggest getting into Warhammer Age of Sigmar with this army, and that is the trees. Silverneth as an army do paint up really well and quite quickly, and they have some really great looking models with a lot of new kits. However, the big detractor for me getting into Silverneth as an army is their need for trees. This is a terrain feature, and unlike a lot of other armies' terrain features where you only have to buy it once, or in the case of Deepkin, maybe twice, you are going to need 3 to 6 sets of trees in your army in order to play Silverneth. This just racks up the cost. You're talking hundreds of dollars extra onto the cost of your base initial army just to play the army and how it functions. This also does mean, because they require these terrain features, that they don't play really well without the Battle Tome. So when you're getting those first few games of Age of Sigmar just learning the core mechanics, you're going to need a Battle Tome, which once again is just upping that initial base cost for the army that little bit more. They do have a decent variety of troops, that is said. The Tree Lord kit comes with a wide variety of things, and they do have a great bunch of dual kits. Even their more static models that only come with one model but have a lot of options are things like the Kurnoth Hunters. They've also got some cool character models, though one of them is a Finecast kit that is a little bit touch and go on whether or not you can get it from online retailers. They do have some complex mechanics basing around their trees as well. The trees just add this extra layer of rules, knowledge, and ability to learn that just makes them a little bit harder to get into. All in all, definitely not an army I would suggest getting into Warhammer Age of Sigmar with. So there you have it. That is 5 armies I suggest to get into Warhammer Age of Sigmar with, and 5 I don't. As mentioned though, I can't stress this enough in the video, don't take my negative reasons for a reason to not get an army, especially if you really, really like the models. That is the be-all and end-all of getting into an army. If you really like the models, it doesn't matter what shortcomings the army has, whether it's cost, efficiency on the tabletop, painting struggles, anything. If you really like those models, you can come through any obstacle that you'll need. These are just some suggestions and some thoughts if you are undecided. Maybe this is an army you want to avoid, if you've got other options that you like that are on the better side to play, or if you've got an army that you really like and you want some reassurance, this could be a way to go to reassuring you that army will be an easy one to learn the game with. All in all though, I hope this video has been helpful to you all, and it's nothing is right or wrong in this. This is just some suggestions I have personally. But thank you all for watching. Well, thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And while you're at it, why don't you go check out the featured channels on my channel and go give all them a like and subscribe as well. A bunch of fantastic Age of Sigmar content there. Lastly, I'd like to give a shout out to everyone who supports the channel in various different ways, whether that be donating via Ko-fi, Patreon, or YouTube members. Thank you all to James, AJC, JC, Christian Weir, Philip Ward, Soren, Kenny Lowell, Alderin, Shot First, Chaos Spawn, and James Crowder. Thank you all so much, everyone, for your support. If you'd like to come chat with me more and other members of our fine community, you can do so by following the link down in the description to our Discord server. And also, if you'd like to help support the channel monetarily like these fine people do, you can do so by following the links to our Ko-fi, Patreon, or simply joining our YouTube members here on YouTube. Thank you all so much, everyone, for watching. Stay safe, stay well, and most of all, keep fighting that war against the Grey. Ciao for now.